Mia,
Hey, how's it going?
doing well. How's it going? Good.
I'll just mention I'm out for a lot of the rest of the week. I don't think there's anything pressing, but maybe kind of slow to respond to stuff.
Okay, no worries. Is it fun or is it work related?
Combination, Wednesday work related, and then the rest of the week I'm going to a wedding in Chicago, so that'll be fun. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Look, I'm gonna do some touristy stuff too. It'll be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah.
I'm excited for you. I actually just booked a ticket to Chicago for one of my friends is running the marathon, so we're gonna go support.
Wow.
Yeah. So let me know
Yeah, where the good spots
what
are. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We're going to a Cubs game, which will be fun. That's always fun. And I want to get to the Art Institute, and I think I'll be able to find family members to go with me because my husband will go to art museums, but it's not his like top
That
list
wouldn't
of
be his
travel
choice.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he'll go with me, but I'm hoping that yeah, I have other family members for going to the wedding who are like excited to go with me. So
That'll be good. Yeah.
yeah,
All right, let me just pull up all of our documents and
yeah,
get.
okay. I think I'm ready to go. Mm,
Hi, Jeff.
Hey Jeff.
Hello. Hi.
Hey, how did the rest of the meeting go?
Well, it went pretty well. Yep.
Good, good.
Hi, Shira.
Hi, welcome back. I
Everyone.
was just asking Jeff how the rest of the meeting went. Everything went well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that document.
Good, good. All right, everyone's coming in. We'll give a couple more minutes and then we can get started. I think we might already be at quorum.
Yes, very, very exciting development. But yeah, yeah, we'll give it another minute, but then I'd love to jump into it because, as always, we're looking at a packed agenda. Okay, I am gonna start it now that I think we have most of us. So we'll start with reviewing the agenda as always, starting with the approval of the September 3rd meeting minutes. Then we'll have updates from the TAG members and the PUC. I think you both may have things to say about the potential study, so we may have to have a joint items with that as well. And then we'll have a guest speaker from Efficiency Vermont to continue our discussion on moderate income households. We'll take some public comment. We'll have some discussion about small businesses and obligated entities. Srini, thanks so much for submitting that for us to take a look at and to prime our conversation. We'll have some public comment. Oh, and then I see, should read the agenda more carefully. We put the potential study as a later item, which does actually restrict the concerns about that overlapping with PUC and tag updates. So let's keep that discussion at 2:10 when we'll discuss the potential study as a whole. Then we're going to talk about the process of editing the final report and a work group that we could potentially set up to help manage the editing process. An update from the credit issue subgroup, which met last week, and an update from the public engagement subgroup, which met, I believe, today. And then, as always, we'll do next steps and close. Is there anything I am missing or we wanna talk about on the agenda? Okay. We'll move on to the review of the meeting minutes from September 3rd. I hope everyone got a chance to look at them. They were put a little late just due to a technical issue. Thanks, Jen, for flagging that for us. Do people feel like they've reviewed the meeting minutes and are comfortable approving them? Okay, great. So I would like to ask for unanimous consent to approve the meeting minutes from September 3rd, 2024. Do I have unanimous consent on that? Digital hands are always helpful.
Yes.
Great.
I can't.
Okay, yeah, Jeff, I see you. Okay, I will interpret that as unanimous consent. We will consider those meeting minutes approved. Thank you, everybody. And now I will pass that over to our TAG members, Emily and Matt, if you have any updates on TAG activity.
Thanks, Mia. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So we heard from Opinion Dynamics, who is working on the Clean Heat Standard measure characterization study. That's going to be the Clean Heat Standard TRM. And I guess we just went over the emissions table with the group and talked through it. We didn't come up with any conclusions. Nothing was put forward, and a breakout group met, I think, last week or early this week. And so we'll be continuing that discussion on Thursday during the next TAG meeting. I did bring up to the TAG that question that we had, whether there's generally anything that we needed to connect on between the two groups, and gave an update on the EAG, and the TAG didn't respond with anything that we should connect on. So there's that. And then Matt talked about some recommendations for changes to the implementation of the Clean Heat Standard, and I'll hold off on that and let Matt speak on that since that's his topic. And then, as most of you might have seen and heard, the final potential study report was released the week of the Clean Heat Standard TAG meeting. So most of the time we had was spent on hearing from NV5, who's the contracted entity working on that report. There wasn't a ton of time for question and answer and discussion, so most of that time was spent on just hearing from NV5 on main assumptions, and I'll hold off on any other potential study discussion until we get there, and I'll hand it out to Matt, unless Mia, you wanted to ask something before Matt jumps in.
Yeah, I was just curious on the measure characterization study report. I didn't read it in like great detail, but it seems to be talking about a lot about the potential characteristics of different fuels. I didn't know, a lot of this group's energy has been focused on installed measures, things like heat pumps and weatherization. And I didn't know if that report or the work of the TAG was going to try to do something around, I guess I'm trying to get in my mind, like, how many credits is a weatherization project or a heat pump going to count for? And like, what does that look like in practice? So I don't know if that's something you're going to get to, or I'm misinterpreting this project.
Go ahead, Dominic. If you want to
That
answer
is
before me.
a separate study that's being done by Opinion Dynamics. They will be presenting to the TAG this upcoming Thursday, so I would encourage people to tune in.
Okay.
And I'll talk more about the whole timeline for that project is during the PUC updates. So
Okay,
right thing you're thinking, just wrong contractor.
Okay. Yep. Okay, thanks. Were there any, Matt, did you want to add anything about what's
Yeah, Dominic alluded to it, but yeah, I think Thursday's meeting of the TAG in 2 days will be really important, and I encourage any EAG member, any member of the public to attend. There are some things that the characterization, I think, that people will agree on and people disagree on. No surprise there, particularly with defining importation of biofuels and renewable gaseous and liquid fuels, and sort of the decisions made to include things but exclude others. I think there are some real questions that those that sell renewable fuels will be asking to figure out how they drew that conclusion and how to determine how to change that before a rule is written, and that those assumptions are baked into a regulation to be considered by the legislature. So it's a really important meeting and discussion regarding different clean heat measures coming up in the TAG.
Okay, great, thanks. Are there any other questions about TAG business? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to turn this over to Dominic for PUC updates. Thanks.
Alrighty, so I've got four things for us today. I'll start with what was just mentioned, the emissions table and generally the TRM, so technical resource manual. One currently exists for the efficiency utilities, and what these documents do is basically give you all these long appendices and tables that talk about what the carbon intensity for each given fuel type, input resource, and measure will be. So Opinion Dynamics is the contractor directly for the commission who is doing this work. They have delivered previously an early win characterization, recently a first draft of their emission table, which primarily looks at fuels. So that is traditional fossil fuels, sustainably sourced, renewable and biofuels, and fuels that go into clean heat measures. That's mostly electricity, but of course there are special cases as well. We've got part of the TRM for clean fuels right now. I believe they will be coming out with more in their next iteration. And we do not have the full TRM for the CHM characterization, so the individual measures. We do expect those before TAG's next meeting, so that's 2.5 weeks from today. As with any project, there are complications and snags, and so we're working with the contractor to get the most complete information as soon as we can. TAG is the entity receiving that, so all of the detailed discussion on the assumptions that go into that are best discussed at the TAG. The other things we've got going on, one, and I think I mentioned this last time, is the request for information on a DDA. So default delivery agent, we released, I think it's about a 7-page document that asks companies who already do work in this space or might be interested in doing work in the space, what basically their business case would be to serve as a DDA. We are primarily looking for responses from entities who already manage programs like these or getting in that business, though we are interested in outside perspectives that do have professional experience in this field. If there's anyone who comes to mind when I say that, please shoot me an email with their business information. Or if you would prefer to contact them directly, we'd really appreciate forwarding this RFI around. The more entities that see this means the more entities that respond to it, which means we at the PUC will have a more realistic look at what a DDA could do in Vermont. I've got 2 more, but I'll pause there for any questions. Hearing none. The commission, I believe it was yesterday, possibly this morning, issued the order describing the Public Utility Commission's enforcement authority, setting deadline for registration compliance and providing guidance for year 2 registration reporting. This is aimed at what we broadly refer to as regulated entities. So we're mostly talking about fuel wholesalers and importers as well as fuel dealers. This document provides some more clarification on registration if the entity had not previously registered with the commission. So we imagine that would mostly be either entities who missed registration the first time around or who have newly started selling fuel into Vermont since that February 29th deadline passed. It also provides a clarification on what the commission is interpreting the current statutory language on what is a regulated fuel. So that is worth giving a close read. And then it talks a little bit about enforcement strategy in the interim before, between now and when this potentially becomes full law. Matt, I see you got a hand.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. I just want to sort of gently correct you here. The registry is required for anyone that sells heating oil, propane, kerosene, natural gas, or coal in Vermont, regardless of how big they are, how small they are, regardless of whether or not they become obligated and will require to produce clean heat credits or pay a clean heat fee in lieu of credits. So this includes the Ace Hardware store or Joe's Corner store in Jericho that sells 2.5 gallons of propane in a canister. The number of entities that will be required to register just expanded exponentially by perhaps 4x or 5x. That's fine. That's the rule. It's supposed to respond to residential, commercial, industrial, not just thermal. So just to clarify how important this decision was by the PUC at the order issued this morning, it means that every entity in Vermont, regardless of where the fuel comes from, that sells propane, heating oil, kerosene, coal, or natural gas, if it is delivered into Vermont, they must register. And they've just been given until October 31st, expanded from the original deadline of January 31st, because so few entities even know that they had to do this. From that list, then the PUC creates a smaller list of those that are obligated because they brought the fuel into Vermont. That number is probably going to be about 80% of the 400 to 500 registered entities that must file in the next 38 days. And if you're cooking hot dogs or heating air or water, it doesn't matter. You're heating up asphalt. If you're a company that heats up asphalt, uses propane and puts it on Route 7, you must, in fact, register your gallons if you're bringing them into Vermont.
It is, as Matt indicated, an important order, something that we've been hearing feedback for in a while. So we worked through all of the channels internally and put that out this morning. I would highly encourage people to give it a close read.
And just, if I can just add one more thing and I'll shut up, with real repercussions. We don't know what they will be if someone doesn't file by October 31st, but the penalty is $10,000 per violation. How the Attorney General interprets what per violation is, whether it's just failure to file or failure to file for different stores or different fuels, we don't know the answer to that yet. We're endeavoring to find out through our attorneys, but it is a significant violation of Vermont law to not submit paperwork in a timely manner.
Pike?
I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, just a quick addition that the rule propagated announces that violations could be considered consumer fraud under the Vermont Consumer Fraud Protection Act, which means that the guilty entity could be liable for up to 3 times of damages too.
Okay, are there any other, Dominic, were there any other PUC items?
Yes, one more. So the last piece I wanted to talk about was the draft rule. We are targeting and currently on track to release the draft rule in early October. We're hoping October 1, but are pretty confident that the first week is doable at this point. Once that is released, per statute, we will have 30 days of public comment. So that means if it comes out on October 1st, it would be November 1st, public comments will be due. We will be holding at least two public meetings. One is going to be technical focused. That's really the ins and outs of the rule. I want to be very clear that both of these meetings are absolutely public. The first one is going to be targeted to people who have been, running these tracks with us and kind of do the ins and the outs where specific issues shook out. And then we'll do a second one that will be more general, kind of open-ended about clean heat standard, and listening to opinions both on specifics of the rule and the impact of CHS as a whole. Depending on how those two meetings go, we may hold additional ones, but those are the two that we currently have planned. And then I do just want to mention that we do not anticipate we will be able to have a cost estimate for the program before the January 15th report deadline to the legislature. There are a number of reasons that we can get into if people are interested, but a quick one is that we do anticipate tweaking parts of the rule in response to the comments we received between October and November. And all of those tweaks will have potentially significant implications on what the cost is. So we are working hard to find that number, but we definitely won't have it with the draft rule. And we currently think the realistic deadline is January 15th for that. And that's all I've got from the PUC.
Great, thanks, Dominic. So with the 30-day sort of comment period that you're targeting, correct? I'm looking at our calendar. We have our next meeting on October 1st. So it seems like either it'll come up like that day or more like the day before or that week. Like I think it's iffy whether or not we will be able to respond as an EAG group to the draft rule that day. So, I'm just looking at our agenda, and that's the next meeting is the 15th of October and then the 29th. So I think we're going to have to be really laser focused to make sure that we are responding. I do think we've talked with a credit issues group of potentially meeting back up and discussing, the draft rule in the context of credit issues. I don't think that's the only way we should discuss the draft rule, but we've been having some great credit specific discussions that I think will fit well into that. So I can anticipate that, assuming that, the rule comes out on October, the week of October 1st, meeting with the credit issues group, on October 9th is sort of scheduled. So I do think that'll be a lot of the discussion. We're going to have a lot of thoughts and feedback about the draft rule and fairly limited time in the appropriate framework to, give EAG feedback officially. So I just want to plant that in people's minds. Ashira and I will do our best to keep a calendar that makes sense, but it may require, I think, some input outside of these meetings in the appropriate channels to make that happen. So let's keep that in mind. I think October is going to go by way faster than we're all really ready for. Are there any questions? Yeah, Chris.
So just to reaffirm what I heard, the EAG will not have any pricing information during the time frame in which we need to complete our final report. So we won't understand the cost impact.
Correct. We will not be able to complete economic analysis during that time frame.
That's a fundamental part of our charge, because the loss or the way it was written, it specifically talks about cost impact and disproportionate, and just what was could you share some feedback from the PUC about what the expectation for the EAG to complete their work without that data?
I do not have specific guidance from the commission at the moment. Two things come to mind. The first is the work that we have been engaging in for the past year. As we work through these design elements, we have been able to narrow in on specific policy decisions that we believe will have an impact on how the program is felt by the public, especially disadvantaged communities. And talking about that in the report is, I think, a really important coloring in of how this policy will actually affect Vermonters. That is that is part of the charge of the EAG, and something that I think the group is well on its way to delivering. The second piece of it is we're saying January 15th as a safe thing. We also want this price information earlier. We are working under constraints that have been discussed before, both internal and in coordinating with other governmental entities to get this work done. If we are able to publish this ahead of time, we will, specifically to inform things like the EAG's report. But again, this is just my opinion, but if there is a price increase line that the group feels is more acceptable or less acceptable, if we're in the range of 1 to 15 cents, this might be a lot easier than if it's in the range of $1 to $5. Obviously, these lines are going to be arbitrary, but if the EAG is comfortable saying almost respond to whatever the number ends up coming out of this analysis. And the other thing that I want to mention is the legislature has the authority, once we give this back to them, to kind of reach into the inner workings and tinker. And to be honest, we expect that they will do that to at least some extent. And that, again, throws the numbers back up into the air. And now got the Joint Fiscal Office doing that analysis. So, Chris, I definitely hear the concern with trying to make a judgment without that number. But we're all faced with that reality at the moment.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, Chris, I think that that's a very valid question about the economic analysis and kind of the timeline. We'll be doing a little bit more talking about the schedule and the timeline a little bit later in the agenda. And I think that it's really important that we do come back to this. I do just want to note that we do have a guest speaker today who has just joined us, and we're coming into that time, and I do want to respect his time as well. So if I can suggest that we kind of table this for right now and hand it over to Emily and Nick from Efficiency Vermont to kind of give us to talk to us a little bit about moderate income, and then we can moderate income households, and then we can come back to this topic, which is, like I said, extremely important. So Emily, I'm gonna hand it over to you. If you can introduce us, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Welcome, Hillary and Nick from Efficiency Vermont. I'll hand it over to you two in just a second. Just wanted to ground us for a second as this group is continuing to draft and write out the report as it relates to the demographic section. We thought it might be helpful to share out some information in the form of data and survey results from Nick, who is a manager of consumer insights. And so, yeah, I'll hand it over to Nick or Hillary to do another introduction.
Yeah, I can kick us off. I know Nick is going to throw some slides up, but while perhaps he preps that, I can just kick us off by saying thank you for the opportunity for Nick and I to present this market research to you all today. My name is Hillary Andrews. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for Efficiency Vermont. And just to name a little bit about my team, so we're responsible for developing the promotional strategies and advertising campaigns for an array of energy opportunities in Vermont, maintaining and evolving the Efficiency Vermont website, and then supporting any development, design, and delivery of the programs that we offer. The one key component of how we do that work is the consumer insights that we gain through market research and the team that Nick leads. And that really helps us better tailor our programs to meet specific needs and solve relevant problems, and then understanding what messaging will actually resonate, which really increases the likelihood of success for a lot of our programs. It's probably important to name that as part of the research that we're going to present out today, we haven't completed specific research around this topic. So we pulled together some insights from a few different data sets that can help shape the understanding of how low to moderate income Vermonters in particular may respond to the implementation of a clean heat standard. Another thing that's worth mentioning that while today we're focusing on this formal research, a lot of what we understand comes through much more organic channels that we see on a daily basis. So things like phone calls from customers or feedback acquired through social media channels where people are brutally honest. And even how people engage with different content and topic areas on our website are all things that we look at. And all of those kind of help us identify themes and customer profiles, much of which can also help us identify future opportunities for deeper or more formal research. So that constant feedback loop is also really critical. So if you have questions that come up for you that maybe aren't directly on the slides that you see today, it's very possible that we might have information that could help. If things come up, feel free to drop them in the chat or just shout them out. And then to that end, something I did want to note is that we're on the verge of launching a heat pump satisfaction survey later this week, and that is targeted to those who have purchased a heat pump within the last 5 years. And it's really looking to understand their experience with the equipment over time, how they're using their equipment, costs associated with that, if anything has evolved over the years, as well as how they may have engaged with the existing heat pump programs in the market. So if there is interest in that data, we'd be happy to come back at a later date and present that, or just share those findings with this group. But jumping in, maybe Nick, I'll let you introduce yourself, but I can share a little bit about the things that we're gonna look at today. So one of the things that we do every other year is we conduct what we call an Energy Pulse survey. It's really something that investigates energy-related topics and measures awareness and perception of Efficiency Vermont as well. And then the other piece of research is a weatherization survey that we did back in 2021 in partnership with VGS that really went deep on Vermonters' perceptions and thoughts about home weatherization. So those are the two pieces of research that we're pulling today. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Nick. Maybe.
Nick, if you're currently speaking, we cannot hear you.
We can see your screen.
You can see the screen, but can you hear me now?
And we can hear
Yes,
you now.
we can hear you
Yes,
now.
thank you so much.
Great. I'm not a Zoom native. I operate in Teams most of the time. So here we are. So it's good Hillary did the intro because mine would have been quiet. So right, these are our two studies. And like Hillary said, we're sort of repurposing these data, right? To sort of see what we can infer from these that's relevant to the decisions at hand. And I'll be walking us through the key findings and then looking into specifics related to each of these. So we've clustered our key findings into two chunks. This first chunk here is about similarities across income groups. In other words, when we look at these items here, we see that really independent of a Vermonter's household income, these are things they all more or less agree on. We see the Vermonters across income groups have a lot of commonalities in the types of projects that they're planning. Not all, but a lot of them really are similar. Their motivations for completing energy projects, and those are primarily related to saving money, improving comfort and convenience. We see that across income bands, far fewer Vermonters say that reducing their carbon footprint is a motivator for energy projects. We see pretty much across income bands, many Vermonters overestimate the impact that weatherization projects would have on their energy bills. They tend to think it would have more of an impact on their bills than is likely to, and that it would cost less than it would likely cost to achieve. When we ask them to what Efficiency Vermont should prioritize, we sort of make them make a tough choice. We don't allow them to say, these things are all important. We say, which is the most important, the second most important, the third most important. And we see, again, pretty similarly for the most part across income bands, those priorities are really similar. And we'll look at what those are in a bit. We also see this mismatch across these income bands. We see overall, many Vermonters think that achieving the state climate goals is important. People want that. They want it to happen. They say it's important. But then when we look into the things they can be doing in their home to sort of drive that, such as completing fuel switching projects, or if we ask the degree to which carbon is a motivator for the projects that they completed, we see those things don't ping very high, actually. And going back to those Efficiency Vermont priorities, when we say, okay, here's your choices, which one is the top? We see the desire for Efficiency Vermont to prioritize those carbon savings over other efforts is really quite low. So a bit of a mismatch. Yes, climate and carbon is really important, but it's not my top priority in my personal life, and I don't want Efficiency Vermont to make it as top priority either. So a bit of a mismatch there. So that's our similarity, right? Those are Vermonters at large. Looking into some of the differences where we see lower income Vermonters being a little different. And here, by the way, I am using the term lower. Sometimes this is true for in most of these cases, it's true where it correlates with income, as in where income goes down, then these things express themselves more and more. In some cases, I do call it out specifically. It's only low versus moderate income households. So the lower a Vermonter's income is, the more likely they are to be somewhat uncomfortable in their home year-round, report their home has little weatherization, and even to report that they're not that familiar with the process of weatherizing a home, to say, I don't know a lot about that and what that entails, actually. For our low-income respondents, we see a slight but significant tick up in the proportion that disagree with the statement, my home feels like a healthy place to live. The lower income Vermonter's income is, the more likely they would consider managing energy expenses to be a high priority. They're more likely to be unsure how they would pay for energy-related projects, and so they don't have money for that as being one of their primary barriers. We also see aversion among lower-income Vermonters to taking out a loan to finance a project. We do see that reduce a bit when we message that not as a loan, but as breaking project costs into monthly payments. But again, so lower income Vermonters are, the higher level here is that lower income Vermonters are saying, it's hard for me to pay and I don't want to take out a loan. We also see that the lower Vermonters' income is, the more likely they are to have not completed that many projects or to be unlikely to be planning a project in the future. Okay, that's the overview. Let's take a quick look at the data that drive each one of these findings, looking first at this section of findings related to all Vermonters across income bands. So that first one, we know that Vermonters across income bands have a lot of commonalities in many, but not all, of the projects they say that they're planning. And here I'm going to take just a minute to intro how we're presenting data here. We've got our data source called out in the bottom, right? So this is from the Energy Pulse 2022. We've got this segmented into low, moderate, and high income ranges. And then here we have the various things. And what the numbers represent depend on the slide, and we'll sort of call those out as they come up. But in this case, it's the percentage of respondents in each category who say they are planning to complete this. In other words, 33% of low-income respondents say they are planning to do some kind of building weatherization. So what I've done to you is highlight with some rectangles some of the ones that we see a lot of commonalities, right? It's not really a meaningful difference across income bands. A lot of Vermont, pretty similar interest in window replacements, pretty similar interest in alternative vehicles, pretty similar interest in energy storage, appliances, water heating, LED lighting. Income is not really predictive of interest in those particular projects. Similarly, we see pretty similar interest for many motivations, and certainly those top ones for completing energy projects. So if you look at these top ones too, we see they're really sort of about that immediate personal benefit. Save money on energy bills, use less energy, which I think is probably tightly related to save money on energy bills, make my home more comfortable, make it healthier, make my life more convenient. Those are the top, and those are the top across income bands, right? Regardless of your income band, those are likely to be your main drivers. Once we get down a little lower, we see goals like reduced greenhouse gas emissions, improve home value, et cetera. Similarly, across income bands, right, we talked about people overestimating the impact weatherization products are likely to have on their energy bills and underestimating the cost. So this is from the weatherization research we did. And we've got some different values here. In the left, we've got the data from the survey, the average value predicted by Vermonters. First, this 155 tells us that's the average value once we remove some outliers, the predicted monthly energy savings from having a, in quotes, fully weatherized home. And then below that we have, let's look to the right instead. To the right, we have an actual value. Now, this actual value, as you can imagine, can really vary widely, right? But when we talked to our EM&B team, they said, well, I can tend to save a few hundred or hundreds of dollars a year. So if we split that by about 12 months per year, this is about what it comes out to per month, about $17 to $34 a year. So pretty substantial mismatch there. Now, granted, it's possible, and this does relate to some other topics too, that maybe people are thinking about fuel bills, which don't come in monthly. So it's possible there's some different ways that people are thinking about those costs. But either way, when we ask people to name how much you think you're going to save about per month, they tell us about 155. And in truth, they would save significantly less, right? Maybe 10 to 20% of that. Looking at that next row, cost to fully weatherize a home, we say, hey, how much does it cost to fully weatherize a home? The average value you get back is $6,445. And as of 2021, when we were collecting these data, the average is probably more like $9,000 to $10,000. So we see people saying fundamentally, I'm going to save a lot, more than they probably will, and I'm going to spend less than they probably will. There's some misconceptions there.
Nick, one thing I wanted to mention is that we see nowadays that weatherization costs are actually closer to $12,000 on average. So just naming that in case you're using this data to for other purposes. But I did also want to note that we have a couple of hands up. I don't know if you want to,
sure,
perhaps,
yeah,
if people want to take themselves off mute and ask any questions you have.
please. Hillary, thanks for pointing that out. My screen share doesn't really allow me
I
to see what's
figured.
going on in the meeting.
It's always hard to present and pay attention to
Yeah,
everyone.
I had a question. If you could, when you have knowledge of it, could you explain where renters versus homeowners fall into any of these categories? If you've broken up these data along those lines as well. Thanks.
Yeah, you know, so I'm not prepared at this moment to give numbers related to that, although we certainly have those data for sure in the Energy Pulse survey, and I think in the weatherization survey.
We do, yeah.
Great.
And I think you'll also potentially see it show up as a barrier on slides, because one of the barriers we have listed is I don't own my own home. So you might see that, but we can break it down by renters.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say just immediately, of course, you know, income tends to correlate with home ownership too. So our low income folks are more likely to rent than are moderate and high.
So a quick follow-up question to that, maybe addressed at the end, would be, you know, are there programs, or how many programs are available to homeowners that aren't available to renters?
I can speak to that. Yeah, I can speak to that from the Efficiency Vermont side. So we do try to either develop most of our programs for renters, I would actually say, have a larger incentive associated with them, because the one challenge, as many on this call know, the one big challenge is that a lot of the folks actually living in those homes don't have the ability to actually or aren't responsible for making those upgrades. So either they can't or aren't allowed to weatherize, and similar with heat pumps, they might not be able to install a heat pump in the place that they're living. So a lot of times what we're doing is actually bringing up incentives so that they are really focused on getting the property owner to be the one to take the action. So a lot of times we have to make the offer or the incentive really good for them to actually decide to improve their home or improve their property. And so that's something that we're doing right now. Additionally, one thing that we're piloting that's about to launch in a couple of weeks is actually window heat pump units, which is a new technology. I believe we will be only the second state to test out this technology, but this pilot is really aimed at low income renters in particular. It's expensive equipment today, but it is something that we're trying to understand whether or not that could be an option for a renter, where they can then take that unit, put it into their home, and then take it with them if they leave. So renters are definitely top of mind, and I'm happy to get more details for you on some of the offers and programs that are available to renters through the Efficiency Vermont programs.
I just put this in the chat, but if folks want a quick link to resources, rebates from Efficiency Vermont for renters, that's in the resource library that this group has access to.
Let's see. Nick, I have a question on the perception around actual savings realized versus what is being predicted for Vermonters. You know, from my understanding, weatherization is being positioned as a fundamental technical step towards electrification for many homes in Vermont. And if you look at the federal weatherization program guidelines, they suggest a third of a reduction in heating bills as a result of good weatherization projects. So it's hard for me to, I mean, when we do the weatherization projects supported either through the CVO, EO organization or through Efficiency Vermont, don't the agencies go about quantifying before and after benefits in a more organized fashion? This seems like a big disconnect from what the real world is being told on the benefits of the weatherization projects. And much of the electrification projects that we are targeting in Vermont, weatherization is fundamental. So if weatherization is not delivering the type of savings that we are saying from a technical perspective, I think there's a disconnect here. So I just wonder whether the agencies are doing a good job of validating before and after confirmation of heating bills. It's a simple math of looking at heating bills, right? You've helped a customer, whether I spend, $10,000, look before and after and, convince them that they have achieved the savings. So
yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit. So this is what we see anecdotally is that many homes do experience a significantly higher proportion of savings. When we're looking at things at a whole, our savings are based on very sort of strict approaches to looking at savings. One of the things that does become more challenging is that we're looking at sort of typically unregulated fuel sources. So I think actually VGS, the VGS team may have really solid data around this in particular because they are able to more directly see the before and after. The other interesting thing about the way that we calculate savings as Efficiency Vermont and the Efficiency Vermont regulated weatherization programs is that they are calculated a little bit differently than the way that weatherization agencies are calculating the benefit. So they're taking into they are taking many more things into sort of the formula, so to speak. There are many reasons to benefit beyond saving, to do a weatherization job beyond savings alone. This is really looking at just savings through the Efficiency Vermont program, but certainly people feel more comfortable, for example. And one of the interesting pieces of data that we didn't pull into this, but we also did a survey around weatherization experience that people have. And the number one named motivation for doing a weatherization project was energy savings, but the number one benefit that they saw thereafter was comfort in my home. And so it's really interesting to kind of see those two things play together. Is the benefits that people are experiencing might actually be different than the motivations as to why they went into doing the project in the beginning.
okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Great. All right, folks, please do keep those questions coming as we move along here. So still on that similarities across income bands, we see pretty similar ranking in terms of what people think Efficiency Vermont should prioritize. And what we proposed people here was we gave them a survey question. We listed out each of these 7 priority areas for Efficiency Vermont. And we asked them to indicate which one's your first, which one's your second, which one's your third priority, and so on and so forth. So here are the values. We have the percentage of respondents in each column who indicated the priority is their first or second priority. And we can see there's a little bit of discrepancy in those first 3 as to which one exactly is the top, but those first 3 are pretty much the top across all income bands. People wanting Efficiency Vermont to help ensure all Vermonters have access to energy saving opportunities, wanting Efficiency Vermont to help weatherize homes to reduce energy costs and boost comfort, and to ensure the affordability and availability of energy efficient products. So all those sort of like very direct, clear benefits, the points that people say are the top priorities they want Efficiency Vermont to focus on. Below that, we see priorities related to renewable energy and battery storage, helping businesses, helping Vermonters reduce their carbon footprints, and efficient transportation. So not unlike those priorities we see for the motivations for people to do projects, it tends to be primarily about how can I save money? How can I be more comfortable today? And we're getting into some of that mismatch that we talked about before. So here's data on people's thoughts about how important it is that Efficiency Vermont achieve its clean energy and climate change goals. We can see many people think it's very important or somewhat important. Almost everyone fits those top 2 categories, with really about maybe 40% overall thinking it's very important. So there's substantial support for that in the state, right? People want us to achieve those climate goals. Then when we compare that to the things that could help us achieve those climate goals, we look at completion of fuel switching projects. So it's the proportion of each income band that completed a fuel switching project. And we see it's ranked relatively low, right? This is by no means the first project people go to. You can see all those projects above them that are completed at higher rates. We look at the degree to which carbon is a motivator, and we see, yeah, about 1/3 of people say carbon is a motivator for the projects that they do. But again, far lower than the ones we've already talked about, saving money and being more comfortable and healthy. And that prioritization, right, which we looked at before. Let's bring that up again. When push comes to shove, people don't want that to be the top priority of Efficiency Vermont. Okay, so that was Vermont-wide. Let's look into differences that vary by income to get a sense of those lower and sometimes moderate income Vermonters' perspectives. The lower a Vermonter's income is, the more likely to be less comfortable in their home year-round and report their home as a low-level weatherization. So here we can see, right, we've got from our weatherization research, the percentage of respondents that gave a high rating, 7 to 10, and a low rating, and we can see that follows right along with income levels in both summer and in winter. And then similarly for low level of weatherization, both the high rating and the low rating follows right along with those income bands. We see lower income Vermonters report a lower familiarity with the process of weatherizing a home, following right along with those income bands. And just among those low income Vermonters are more likely to disagree with the statement that my home feels like a healthy place to live. Now, that's not a large percentage of respondents by any means, even among the low income group, but still it is significant that really almost no moderate or high income Vermonters disagree with that, whereas about 13% of low income Vermonters do. We see a higher likelihood of Vermonters saying that managing energy expenses is a priority in their life, the lower their income is, the cost of energy in your home and the cost of transportation. We also see a higher proportion of low-income Vermonters saying they're unsure how they'd pay for energy-related projects, to say, I don't have money to spend on energy projects at that time, to identify this as a barrier to completing projects. We also see, okay, right, if folks don't have the money to spend, perhaps they could achieve this by financing. But we see aversion to financing to some degree across all income levels, but particularly among those low income group and to some degree the moderate. Each of these is the percent of respondents who would somewhat or very strongly consider the item in this column here. So we can see those low income Vermonters at only 17 and 23% consider paying with a loan from friends and family or from a bank. And those numbers go up the more money the household has. Now, we do see that there's a way to message this that does change willingness to participate a bit. You'll see these bottom two rows talk about paying for a project monthly, essentially breaking into monthly costs. So the framing is important here, right? Particularly this second row from the bottom, where we talk about if there's no impact on overall cost, in other words, no interest. We see substantially higher interest across income bands, but you'll note still not 100%, right? There's still aversion to that, and even pay monthly on electricity fuel bill through that existing channel. So how people think about financing does influence their willingness to participate in it. We also see lower income Vermonters reporting a lower likelihood of completing a project in the future and in the past. So here we have up top data from the weatherization research, both the high ratings, the 7 to 10, and the low ratings, 1 to 4, of likelihood to complete a project in the future. And we see those follow both of them right along income bands. The lower your income is, the less likely you are to complete a project in the future. And then here we've got the projects people completed down at the bottom here. And you can see some of these don't vary too much by income band, but others do. And overall, you notice that darker green is skewed toward the righter side of the table, right? The dark green representing the bigger numbers pretty much across almost all project types. And you also see this none down here at the bottom, this low income none, 9%, saying they have not completed any energy saving projects in their homes. So wrapping it up, this is right, there's a narrative version of what we've looked at so far. We see that relative to higher income Vermonters, many lower income Vermonters live in less comfortable homes that have lower levels of weatherization. Many of these Vermonters report not being as familiar with weatherization, what it is and how to do it, as their higher income peers. Ongoing energy costs are important to lower income Vermonters, and the upfront costs of projects are often a barrier. Many do not want to take out a loan for an energy project, although more would consider breaking project costs into monthly payments. These Vermonters report lower rates of completing energy projects, including switching from fossil fuel-fired equipment to efficient electrification options, and their higher income peers do. Although many Vermonters think it is important for the state to achieve its climate goals, many of these same Vermonters are not taking some of the steps that would support this achievement, like fuel switching, nor encouraging Efficiency Vermont to prioritize this work over efforts that would save them money via reduced energy use. And now I'll hand it back to Hillary for some forward-looking thoughts. You know, maybe I'll pause for questions, actually. I see some folks there. Matt, what do you got?
Yeah, thanks. Fuel switching takes on many different references to people. For some people, they think it means And maybe it does mean in your study and in your mind a complete switch over from a combustion-based fossil fuel heating system to an all-electric heating system. In the studies that we've done at the TAG and the EAG, it is not that. It is recognizing that a cold climate heat pump reduces the thermal load, but in most cases with existing heating stock, in fact provides supplemental heat, reducing fossil fuel consumption, but not eliminating it. And that's certainly speaking on behalf of the heating cooling contractors. Our members are the ones installing them. They're not removing oil and gas fired boilers in existing homes in the vast majority of cases. So I don't know, when you say fuel switching, I assume you're using the same terminology as the other consultant groups, which means another type of heating system that reduces fossil fuel system, and not actually meaning switch, as in removing one and installing another. Can you confirm?
What I can say is to show the question, like the language that the respondent that we're pulling these data from. And we've got this up on screen here down relatively near the bottom. I'm not sure if y'all can see my cursor. It is, I'll read it out loud, switching from fossil fuel fired equipment to energy efficient electric options, which I read as being a switch indeed from fossil fuel to energy efficient electric options. Although in truth, what we haven't done is dug into the differences of people's the acceptability, I guess I'll say, of doing a full conversion versus adding a heat source so that they have, say, a heat pump and a supplementary. That would be a deeper dive.
Yeah, I just think that's really good data. NYSERDA does that. And so we know, looking at the NYSERDA data, whether this home has a gas or oil-fired equipment, and whether, in fact, an electric heat pump is just providing cool air and warming a section of the house, or if it is, in fact, doing more of that. And that's really important, I think, as we go forward and figure out, as every heat pump we install, what it actually is doing in terms of reducing fossil load versus the assumption, which I think is a wrong-headed assumption, that you install one mini split in a 2,500 square foot home and you no longer are using gas or oil, which we know as the people in the field that do the work is not true, is a false assumption.
And I would actually say that that's something that Efficiency Vermont feels quite strongly about as well. Whenever we're making recommendations to customers, it is always that there is that backup system available. So we're not advising people to, completely cut out their fossil fuel fired system and replace it entirely with a heat pump, unless the rest of the house might allow them to do that, which in most instances, as you've named, most houses can't do that, at least at this time, or with some other interventions. And so I think one of the things that we recognize, it's not even a home might have more heating systems than just those two things as well. I think what we see is there could be 3 or 4 ways that people are heating. There could be the fossil fuel fired furnace or boiler. They might have a heat pump as well. They might also be using wood to heat certain parts of their home. And they might also be pairing that with, a small electric, little heater in a room that they don't use that frequently. So I think what we see very much in Vermont homes is that every home is different. There is typically a pretty modeled framework of different ways that they're heating their home. And that is one of the things that makes it very complicated when it comes to just installing a heat pump. It's not typically as simple as I have heard some reflect that you can just kind of swap everything out and install a heat pump. It's not that simple. And that actually speaks to one of the things on that last slide, Nick, if you want to jump to that last slide on some of the next last one. That this speaks to. I'm just going to kind of jump into the future research, and I can go through the recommendations as well. But in terms of the future research, I think one of the things that we do want to look at is identifying the total cost of ownership for home heating with heat pumps, which includes any sort of secondary systems, the maintenance associated with those, and the usage costs. Because I think in a lot of instances, what we will be asking people to do is potentially maintaining 2 different systems. Now, that might mean that perhaps your furnace or boiler doesn't last 30 years, it lasts 60 because you're not putting as much stress on the system because of the heat pumps, and it might not. So I think that's something that we would really recommend digging into a little bit more and just really looking at that total cost of ownership, just to refine accurate messaging and payback periods. Another thing is just understanding the customer prioritization of clean heat projects compared to other personal non-energy projects or expenses. And then a deeper understanding of concerns related with clean heat tech would also be helpful. And then the other thing that I would say would be really important is really testing consumer appetite and reaction to different types of program designs, if that is what happens as a result of the clean heat standard, before finalizing an approach, because it's really interesting just to see and understand how people react to certain things, how they're interpreting certain things, regardless of that, of whether that's the intention behind something. It's really helpful to kind of go and get that consumer feedback before kind of making decisions around how a program actually looks in a market. Jumping back up to recommendations, some of the recommendations that we have as a result of this research are actually leaning into customers' motivations for this. So promoting heat pumps in terms that align with those motivations, which are cost savings, comfort, and health. Messaging may include mentions of carbon reductions, but carbon reductions alone won't get them or drive them beyond that first cost barrier, which is going to be perceived as pretty high. And then consider getting customers in the door by promoting the cooling benefits of heat pumps. We know that is something a lot of people are experiencing. Their homes are getting hotter. The demand for cooling in Vermont homes increases. There is not a lot of central air conditioning in Vermont. So all homes most homes in Vermont have functional heating already. So for a lot of people, they're going to think that a heat pump is kind of a nice to have. Gosh, they'd really like it for cooling. If we can kind of get in the door through that angle and can educate on using the heat pumps in the winter as well, that could be an opportunity to get more heat pumps deployed sooner rather than later. When relying on financing to enable customer project completions, using terms like breaking the cost down into monthly payments is going to be more attractive to customers than saying something like take out a loan or get financing. They'll be kind of more interested in a different language, whereas terms like loans and financing can kind of shut people down immediately. And then simplifying programs and decisions whenever possible. So one of the things that we see, and maybe many have even experienced, is that there are a number of different programs. There are a number of different offers out there. There's federal incentives and state incentives and utility incentives and special offers. Maybe even your contractor has a special offer. And so that's actually a really complex program design for an individual customer to kind of navigate. So any opportunity to simplify any program design is going to be much more helpful in helping customers participate.
Thank you, Hillary. And it looks like we have a few hands. We've also blown straight through our public comment period. So I want to give a quick chance to any members of the public who have a comment, and then we'll go to Jeff and Chris, and then I'm so sorry, but we'll have to wrap up. So if we have any members of the public who'd like to make a comment, please feel free to come off mute and speak your comment into the room. Okay, not hearing any, so I will go to Jeff and then Chris and then Matt. I think your hand is still up from before, so unless I'm wrong, we'll just go with Jeff and Chris, and then we'll have to wrap up.
Okay, just had a quick comment. I was really surprised at what I consider a high percentage of low-income folks that were planning a weatherization project. I think it was 30%, and replacing windows that I think I saw around 30%. Wondering if we're missing something, because that seems really high for a low-income person to take out a loan, or they'd have to take out a loan to pay for something like that. Was I seeing that data correctly, or does EVT see that high of a turn, for their home performance program? Do they see that many people doing projects?
We do see a fair amount of people doing those projects. So when we've looked at some of our most recent income data for home performance, about 50% of people who go through home performance are low and moderate income, and then about 40% of that 50% do tend to be low income specifically and not moderate. So we do see high levels of engagement. There are also very high incentives right now for those projects. So that is a component of it. One of the things we don't know, and that that research didn't specifically ask, it's very possible that those low-income customers are very aware of the weatherization programs. So they might be considering it as in they're perhaps on a wait list already. They're maybe engaged with their weatherization agency. So it's possible that they're thinking of it as that program and not perhaps kind of a market rate program.
Okay. What is the definition you used in that for low income?
So low is anything below 80, moderate is 80 to 120, and then higher income is above 120.
Okay, thanks.
Jeff will also say, you know, when you were citing how interesting it was that so many said they were planning, you know, and you went right to financing. So it's financing might be perhaps a relatively late, I'll say like relatively late step on the planning journey versus thinking, man, I got these drafty situation. I got to weatherize this. I think I'm going to figure that out next year. I'm planning to weatherize. So what exactly does planning mean in this context can range a bit too, I think.
Okay. Thanks.
One other little tidbit that we saw from that research that was also really interesting is that people were really quite articulate and had a deep knowledge of what weatherization was. They really understood the projects that were associated with weatherization. But one of the things that they mischaracterized was the type of projects that would actually have greater impact on their bills. And so they were putting things like windows, for example, can have savings associated with them, but are very expensive. So for most, that's a hard weatherization measure to actually tackle. And then they were prioritizing other things that actually would have probably very little cost savings associated with them. And so that was very interesting as well. So while they could kind of generally speak to the types of projects that a weatherization project was made up of, the things that they were associating or planning to do, many people want to do it themselves. A lot of those things were not necessarily things that would have a significant impact. So again, kind of going back to that definition of weatherization, what is involved in kind of a more comprehensive weatherization project might be a little bit different than what somebody might be planning on doing.
Chris, go ahead.
Hillary, hey Nick, great presentation. So the Clean Heat Act really isn't it isn't a weatherization bill, right? So the presentation's been focused on weatherization. And I know sounds like, you know, in combination with Jeff's existing work and the work at Efficiency Vermont, how do you see the clean heat standard impacting your current delivery of options to help folks? Because sometimes there's a mischaracterization that you have to make a case for weatherization. Like I don't think that's the case. Everyone's on board with that. It's just I would be interested in hearing your impact or your feedback on how the Clean Heat Standard would improve Efficiency Vermont's ability to deliver your existing programs or expand them, because some of the recommendations that you made, I hope you're pursuing regardless of the Clean Heat Standard is implemented. So I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you.
I can take a first go and then maybe I can hand it off to Hillary. Okay. I think right now, Efficiency Vermont is pretty unclear about the relationship of existing programs and how the Clean Heat Standard will impact existing offers, incentives, and we're definitely thinking a lot about incremental projects within existing programs and in relationship to how existing programs work with each other. So that's kind of the non-answer that I have right now, as I've been thinking through the Clean Heat Standard and impacting, creating additional incremental projects. So unsure. I think a lot is to be determined when the draft rule comes out, and a lot of that is related to market formation and credit ownership. But I'll hand it over to Hillary if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think it's specific to the Clean Heat Standard. I think that I don't have anything additional to add. And in terms of recommendations and how we plan on approaching clean heat technologies, we'll continue to sort of plot along as we sort of have, and definitely use some of the recommendations that we see in this research and kind of coming in future research to inform the programs that we're responsible for.
Great, thank you. I think that's what we have for time. Hillary, it would be really great if you could send me a copy of these slides, or Nick, a copy of these slides and sort of any other relevant materials. I see that Emily put some in our resource document, which is in the chat. But if there's anything else with some of this data, just a summary of, the projects that you're seeing and that sort of stuff, information around costs, kind of anything that's close at hand, I think would be really great if we could reference in our final report. So would really appreciate that. And Nashira and I can distribute that.
Additionally, if there's any contact information you would like to share, I'm sure there's some continuing conversation that people might like to have. So, but thank you both so much for joining, and thank you, Emily, for arranging this. We really appreciate it. And with that, we are going to move forward into a discussion about small businesses and obligated entities. So if you haven't already seen, Srini circulated an updated version of the response to that section. And give me a second as I pull up the demographics worksheet for us. But as I'm doing that, Srini, if you wouldn't mind just talking us through a little bit about what you were thinking when you were writing and making the updates.
Yeah, thanks, Ashira. I'm going to focus on small businesses, not obligated entities, right? You had mentioned both, so I'm just going to focus on small businesses. Okay. So first of all, hope everyone is able to look at the updated version. At the outset, I would say that, having spoken to, some of the representatives who are part of the small businesses through the South Burlington Business Association and the Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility, BBSR, I would say that the complexity in the small businesses is equivalent to what we see in the residential sector. So what you see as a small business could be a pizza place next to your neighborhood. It could be a church, could be the school nearby, could be the mall, could be the gas station. And it has got the same flavor of intricacies around the type of building these businesses are located at, and what type of infrastructure that they're using, whether they're dedicated to what they have, to their facility, or is it part of a lease facility, or is it part of a shared facility? So I just want to emphasize that the small businesses represent almost a third of the total emissions of the thermal sector. So it is a very important segment, but I believe the complexity and the implementation strategy is going to be as difficult as what we have seen in the residential area. The primary fuel types are the same as what are typically used in the residential sector, which is fossil gas, fuel oil, and propane. By the way, all this data is from the summary reports of Energy Action Network. That's my source for the thermal sector for the small businesses. So what is a small business? Anything less than 500 employees is what is defined as a small business. It represents roughly 60% of the employment in Vermont. There are close to 80,000 businesses, and 80% of these businesses are owned by a sole proprietor and operated by a sole proprietor, and sometimes as a part-time job. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of these businesses are likely to have shared facilities and infrastructure. And then the rest of the 20% are businesses that can be a school district or a company like OnLogic, up to 500 employees. And it represents a variety of industry sectors. So that's just an overview of what the small businesses are made up of. Small businesses, again, represent professional services. It could be a consulting firm or an accounting firm, sharing an office in an office complex. It could be retail business like Target, or a business in a strip mall. It could be a construction company. It could be a healthcare service provider, public administration. manufacturing and distribution. There's a lot of businesses in Vermont that are set up to do small manufacturing, assembly, and distribution. And one thing to note about these type of businesses, most of them operate in what I call as a shell structure. These are not insulated buildings like residential or commercial office buildings for a variety of reasons. And they use fossil gas not only for space heating, they also use fossil gas for processing in their facilities.
Can I ask for a quick pause? I'm so sorry. If anyone is making suggestions in the document itself, if you could just make sure that you're suggesting and not directly editing, so that we can keep a track of who's making the changes and what those changes are. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Srini.
All right, thank you, Ashita. So in some of these applications, it came up in the call that Matt hosted through his Meadow Hill Consulting group in the last 2 weeks. One specific HVAC manufacturer brought up the issue of, he's got people working in a shop floor where they rely on space heating. Space heating is based on propane. In that type of building, it's going to be hard to put in a heat pump, air source heat pump, and deliver the same type of performance in a cost-effective way. So there needs to be custom solutions for those type of spaces. Interestingly enough, as I look through the NV5 report, the NV5 report specifically talks about commercial buildings, and they have looked at the commercial buildings based on NREL database inventory for Vermont, and they have put them in like 6 or 7 major categories. And they have actually suggested a solution. I'm actually kind of surprised at this. I know that for residential applications, they have focused on established, proven technologies, whereas for commercial applications, they have actually suggested a distributed geothermal network system. It sounds a bit academic at this point, at least from my perception. In all the conversations I've had with small businesses, nobody is even thinking about distributed geothermal systems as an alternative for their heating needs, thermal needs today. So I was very surprised by that, the fact that it's actually mentioned in the report, and it is used in the calculation as a major solution for meeting the 2030 and the 2050 emissions target. I just wanted to mention that. So anyhow, so there needs to be like specific custom solutions for these type of facilities. Bigger, smaller businesses, like, if you think of larger manufacturing companies around, South Burlington, they have actually, several of them have already adopted solar installations and also LEED certification. LEED certification is one more way for commercial buildings to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Unfortunately, LEED certification is an expensive undertaking. You have to be in a position to either build a new building or do a retrofit of an existing building in a significant way to meet LEED standards to achieve greenhouse gas emissions. So, so with that, I hope I have gone into some flavor or some background on some of the issues and the challenges faced by the small businesses. I did spend some time in, thinking about, what else can be done from an implementation perspective. In talking to the South Burlington Business Association, I think the biggest thing that is lacking today in the clean heat standard discussion is there is not enough participation from the small businesses in any of the discussion. I went back and looked at the engagement group discussions. There is not adequate participation. I think there is very little awareness. And so there needs to be more engagement for small businesses to voice their opinion on how they would actually adopt clean heat standard. The second thing that I would suggest is there are, through programs such as LEED certification actually provides the ability to get funding through different agencies. There may be a way to promote LEED certification type projects to reduce greenhouse gas emissions going forward. The third approach that I would like to highlight is under Biden administration, there is a new initiative called SBCI that is focused on funding small businesses for projects around renewable energy, manufacturing, healthcare, and farming projects. And there is roughly about $10 billion allocated for this. Vermont Economic Development Authority has submitted 3 different applications for a funding of $50 million. So there may be ways to access this funding to facilitate implementation of specific measures in the small business segment. The last one is really around making sure that small businesses are aware and are able to take advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act provisions for energy efficiency programs in commercial buildings. It's available in the form of a new building as well as adding solar installations or green fuel-based solutions for heating in commercial buildings. So those are some of the approaches that I wanted to highlight. I am planning to talk to about 5 or 6 more significant small business representatives to get their perspective on how they are thinking about clean heat standard. It'll be interesting to mention to them what NV5 has assumed around this geothermal network system, distributed system as a solution. I'll be interested to hear what their thoughts are on this. So if any of you have heard about this before and would like to give me some feedback or input on this, I appreciate it. And I also welcome any other thoughts or any other suggestions or leads on what I can follow up to make this summary more relevant.
With that, I'll open it up to the rest of the EAG. If there's any suggestions that you have for Srini, any questions, comments, thoughts, feel free. Go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, Srini, I think this is super helpful. I think you've done a great job at kind of going through this data, and I agree that the discussion hasn't been particularly robust around small businesses. I do wonder, kind of as an EAG group, where we should think about this in the grand scheme of our recommendations and effort, considering the sort of gravamen of Act 18 sort of tells us to be concerned about low-income households. We also haven't touched about things like, municipal buildings and schools, which will also sort of see some of the same impacts, I guess, like flavors of both the individual households and these businesses, issues that they're encountering. So I don't know where we go with that, but I am kind of wondering about, the clean heat standard will affect everybody. And I'm glad we're having this conversation, but I don't know if we need to think about how much real estate it takes up in the final report. But I'm glad we're having this conversation. I do think it's valuable. So more of a comment than than anything I know what to do with.
Okay, thanks.
So we have Ben and then Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Srini, for writing this up. I really like where you're going with this. And I did want to just on the network geothermal piece there from the NV5, good of you to call that out. But I did just want to offer a little bit more color there, a little more clarification. So while they did devote a couple pages in the report to discussing network geothermal, they found that it is in Vermont technically feasible. But it was did not in the if you dive into the workbooks provided by NV5, they did not actually project forward any significant greenhouse gas savings from the network geothermal because of its cost. So that was actually screened out based on cost, and
I see,
largely due to the fact that Vermont has a lot of low density neighborhoods and construction. So Yeah, you're right. They definitely if in like a perfect world, if they could wave a magic wand, that would be a great solution for the business community. But because of the cost and real world, how would this actually happen? It got screened out on. So we don't see it as a major GHG reduction measure as part of the study. But
okay.
So just wanted to say that.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out, Ben.
Sure.
Go ahead, Matt.
I just want to thank Srini for his work and point out that one of the things that we did learn from the NV5 study is that businesses consume a lot of fossil fuels, and those fossil fuels emit greenhouse gases. And in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions commensurate with the Global Warming Solutions Act, there needs to be significant reduction, not just in homes, but in buildings that are either schools or public buildings or commercial buildings or retail establishments of some sort. And it does get complicated because every home is different, of course, but homes are a lot more similar from town to town than for instance, a small business. It's depending on what kind of purpose that business is built for, why it was built. So it's really tough one. But also, like we're talking about nonprofit organizations that serve low-income Vermonters and as an equity advisory group, thinking about ways that we can prioritize that or how that. Well, there's lots of businesses that are in this sort of in the same boat that aren't just producing computers for California, but are actually serving a low-income community. I'm thinking about convenience stores in certain towns and restaurants. So I do think I appreciate doing this work because I think it has a lot of value thinking about equity for.
Yeah, Matt, I do agree that the it's easy for high-tech companies to take on greenhouse gas emissions reduction project, but because it fits in their larger portfolio of values and the mission that they have, and it's really organizations like that are close to our home, the guy who owns the pizza joint or the local church, those are the type of small businesses that are really going to struggle in finding appropriate solutions, cost-effective solutions here and get the right capital support. I do want to mention that this is actually in the Efficiency Vermont's portfolio of products. Some of the businesses have actually successfully switched from fossil fuels to pellet-based boiler heating systems. And I'm not really sure how that fits in the overall. It is a green solution, but I'm not really sure how it fits in the overall portfolio positioning for greenhouse gas emission reductions going forward in the commercial sector. So that's one area that I also picked up through what Efficiency Vermont is supporting for commercial businesses today.
Yeah, Dominic?
Matt, I've just got my hand raised. I lost some of your audio at this ellipses right here. If you remember what you were saying, I invite you to either shoot me a message to drop it in or make that edit yourself. Apologies.
Great. And we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment as well. Do we have anyone from the public who has any comments or that they'd like to raise? If you can go ahead and speak them into the room. Okay, not hearing any. Do we have any other comments or thoughts from the EAG on the small businesses? Great, not hearing any. And I want to be very transparent. So back when we were making kind of the work plan on how we were going to tackle some of these sessions, we had combined obligated parties and small businesses into the same day. And then I started just thinking of them as one connected issue. So we didn't really get to prep Matt. We didn't get to prep you to be able to talk about the obligated parties, and we also didn't leave enough time to be able to speak about both of them. So we'll go back into the work plan and make sure that we have a dedicated session to be able to speak about obligated parties maybe next week. So obligated entities. So Matt, when you're ready, you might want to prepare for next meeting. But with that, I'll move us into Pike, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick suggestion. I had forgotten all about our resource page. So thank you, Emily, for reminding me of that and putting it back up. I am wondering if the PUC or whoever is in charge of the website can share the link to that resource page right in under the Equity Advisory Group heading, so that I and the public and others can use it more often. Thanks.
Great suggestion. Dominic, I don't know if that's something that's possible.
Yeah, it is. It is certainly technically possible. If it is something the EAG want to do, a quick little vote on that. I'll double check, to make sure that that's something the commissioners want on the website that says PUC on it. But I don't think there would be opposition, especially if we make clear that it is a EAG resource. So yes, technically possible. If the group wants to post that, please direct me and I will make sure that's good to go and do so.
Great. So it sounds like Pike or someone else would need to make a motion for a vote to be able to post the link.
I make a motion to post the link to the resource page under the Equity Advisory Group section of the PUC website, right where the meeting minutes, et cetera, and notice of meetings in that section. That is my motion, as bumbling as it sounds.
Thank you, Pike.
I just amend the motion to make sure that's not an editable. We don't want it like the public to be able to edit that. But so as long as it's just up there, that's cool with me, but just with no edit access.
I accept the friendly amendment.
And just to clarify, Ashir, I think it is editable now. Is it only editable by EAG members, or is it editable by anybody?
No, it's editable by anyone. So what we would need to do is just go through and make sure that everyone, so there's that I restrict the access to only the EAG members. And so you just have to make sure that you give me the email address that you use Google Docs for, and then I can restrict it to only EAG members. And I would say EAG members and Dominic and myself.
Okay, yeah, I'm not opposed to making it public. This isn't supposed to add any barriers. It's a parking lot for like, oh, I found this cool report, and if you're writing in your section, this might be a great place to get data on like state weatherization activity or something. So I'm not opposed to it being available to the public. I just like really don't want to make any barriers to this group being able to use it as a helpful resource for writing the report. And we're not vetting this before doing it. I mean, anyone in our group can put anything, so that we may want to put a disclaimer that this is just for information, like at the top of the document or something. So I'm not opposed, but it seems slightly logistically complicated to me.
Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, all in favor of Pike's motion, would you raise either your actual hand or your virtual hand? Okay. All right, I'm seeing 9. And anyone opposed? And anyone abstaining? Okay, so it looks like we will move ahead and post the resource library on the PUC site. We'll make sure to restrict it to only EAG members. I'm asking that you please send me the email address that you'd like to use for Google Docs. and that we add a disclaimer at the beginning. All good. Okay. So then I'm going to go ahead and close this so that no one else can edit. So this is now marked as view only. I'll stop sharing. And we wanted to have some time to talk a little bit about the potential study. How many of you were able...
Sorry, do we need to do public comments since it's on the agenda?
We did. No one... No, I thought
this one too? Sorry, did I miss that? I thought we did it for the moderate income households. Was I too busy looking at this? Sorry.
I think I started asking it and then we got the question about the
okay. I don't want to make it complicated.
No, no worries at all. If there is any public comment, please speak into the room.
Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. I didn't think so, but I just wanted to see if it was on the agenda. Let's make sure we reported it. Okay, thank you. Continue about the potential study. Sorry about that, Ashira.
No worries at all. So we have a few minutes to talk about the potential study. And really we wanted to have, just so that we can get a sense, how many of you were able to go to the TAG meeting, the last TAG meeting where they talked about the potential study? So Mia and Pike, Ben, Emily. Okay, great. So you can help us fill in some of the blanks as well. But we wanted to know what your reflections were on that, what that might mean for the report itself, and kind of start thinking through if we're envisioning any changes based on what we heard last week. Yeah, go ahead, Pike.
Yes, so with regard to the the carbon intensity value of wood and its multiplication by 0.32, I think that's entirely too low. It should be at least 1, which means that the full emissions factor found in the EPA emissions hub would be calculated for wood, as it should be. Also found that the last minute inclusion in the NV5 report of the Burlington, Vermont Gas District Energy proposal using erroneous calculation information was really a breach of public trust. You know, there was nothing that suggested they were going to add this until the very last minute. And I'm going to make that comment again on Thursday at the TAG meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Pike. And as we do this, since we have about half of the people who were able to attend and half who weren't, if we can give a little bit more context as well, just to bring everybody onto the same page. Yeah, go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, I think, if anyone's sort of watching how this is filtering through the news space, the report quotes a $9 billion sort of potential upper limit. And that's my understanding as a non-technical person, the cost of doing all the things to get to the Global Warming Solutions Act goals. That doesn't translate directly into how much it's going to cost any individual person, because that sort of upper boundary number doesn't consider things that we're already paying for or things that the federal government will pay for. So my understanding is it's a potential study in terms of the things we could do, but doesn't necessarily reflect on what the actual borne costs are going to be, over the long period. So I think that's helpful. There is an appendix towards the end of the page that has some sort of, at the end of the document that talks about cost potential. And I did some back of the envelope math, and I think others have done that as well, that sort of suggests that in a sort of range of the total cost of all the activities and the cost when you consider doing this really efficiently, or including federal and state resources, their table suggests that within the cost of the clean heat standard would add between, I'm just looking at my notes, $2.12 and 94 cents per gallon for propane, and for fuel oil it's $4.04 and $1.79 per gallon. And those are ranges. I can put sort of this in the chat. I think other people have done the same thing, and I think it also has some caveats that it's not responding to a policy of the clean heat standard. It's responding to like, well, this is the cost of all the things we could do. So I think that data is out there. I don't know, based on our earlier discussion, if we're going to get better data than that, but I think these sort of things are sort of permeating through our Vermont news ecosystem, and we should think about them, but also take them with a grain of salt, because we don't know what the actual impact of what the PUC is going to propose. So that's what I took away from this. And I'm sure people can jump in if I'm way off base on any of this. I'll throw the sort of math I did in the chat, but I've sort of seen other people do the same thing. So that's what I've got. And I'm sure other people who are more informed can say more.
Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess one thing that I've said before is there's a lot of emphasis on the cost and what it's going to cost. And I think it's really important as our report to also bring in the societal benefits, because that's the overall economic picture of what we're doing. And I think the societal benefits were up somewhere like 20 billion. So it's really important to emphasize that, not just what it will cost individual people or the state, but if you cost it out like we do energy efficient appliances, 10 years down the road, once these things are done, we may be saving more money than spending. That's an equitable issue to me.
We have Ben and then Matt.
Yeah, I think Mia spoke well to the cost. There is NV5 put out cost estimates for maximum achievable savings that can be achieved, and then optimized results. And obviously those things are going to depend. The actual final cost is going to depend on what kind of acquisition strategies the state uses for acquiring these resources, both from installed and delivered fuels. So it's really going to depend on kind of the path that we as a state choose to take in terms of the final cost. I was going to bring up just some of the kind of high-level findings from the report related to low and moderate income attainment of the statutory targets of 16%. Some of you might have noted in the report or noticed, I believe it's page 49 of the report, basically showing that it is basically the low income portion of the, low income attainment of the statutorily required 16% emissions reduction from that sector is basically we can't hit the target with the pool of, low income Vermonters that we have now. Basically, because I think part of that could be due to the fact that there is not enough emissions from Vermonters with a 60% AMI, area medium income and lower. So not enough emissions from that sector to constitute a 16% reduction in overall greenhouse gas, reductions there. So we're going to talk about the low and moderate income definition kind of memo that we worked on in the credit issue subgroup, but just wanted to flag that. If folks have any questions about that, we can kind of unpack that a little more, but it's going to be hard to hit that target for the low income segment because it's a small population.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, just want to echo what Ben said about Mia nailed it. That's exactly right. This isn't the end all. Some people might say $4 is too much. Some say too little. Some say $1 is too much. Some say it's too little. PUC will ultimately choose the ceiling price in December, and that's what the legislature will act on. I just want to push back on the comment about the societal benefits. We understand intellectually that there's value in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I think that's the reason why we're all here. But to suggest to someone who's struggling to pay rent or their grocery bill, oh, don't worry, there's a societal net benefit in all this. There's a cost, but for us to quantify it and then to tell people you're going to pay higher fuel bills, but don't worry, there's a societal net benefit. They'll say, well, how do I write a check off of that? They can't. So I think it's to be very cautious about any statement where we say, spending $10 billion will deliver a societal net benefit when there's people that are really going to have to face the fact that they're going to be higher fuel bills until they can access clean heat measures. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. And Mia, thank you for putting that in the chat. Do you mind just reading it out loud as well?
It was the content of what I said, and I was just worried people were having trouble following it, so I thought we were okay. I could read it out, but it was really just, I didn't know if people could understand what I was saying. Do you want to?
If you might, if you don't
Okay,
mind.
I'm sorry, everybody. Yeah, so if you look at page 56 of the report, based on the math I did, that's between 212 and 0 to 94 cents per gallon of propane within their modeled range, and between $4.04 and $1.79 per gallon of fuel oil in their modeled range. And from the just price I checked, it looks like when in the winter, propane peaked at about $3.50 per gallon, and heating oil was about $4.20 at its peak. So you can see the relative amount. So sorry for abusing the chat. I didn't think that was very clear with me just saying numbers. So thanks everybody.
Helpful to see it in the chat, but just want to make sure. Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Mm-hmm.
So what does the total cost actually mean? Is the total cost for all those customers today who source those fossil fuels when we start implementing this whole program, or for those who remain on those fossil fuels forever going forward? Is it the total cost to the consumer, all consumers, or is it the incremental cost to the consumers who do not switch from fossil fuels?
My understanding is that sort of $9 billion number is the cost of all the things. So the price of doing these activities, whether it's biofuels, heat pumps, the sort of mix that they have prescribed, if you think of it as a basket of activities. Okay. So like the sticker price of doing those things is $9 billion. And it doesn't comment on like who is paying for what. And they have a table at the end that I referenced in the chat. It's table 28 that says like, oh, we may see these market impacts for people who are still paying for heating oil or propane. So I think that's how it breaks down. It's not how much each individual person will have to pay or any specific household will pay. That's how I am understanding that.
It's the cost the sector has to bear to reduce the emissions corresponding to that. Okay, it's
correct, but not pricing in, incentives like the Inflation Reduction Act. Not they talk about it in the report, but not there. Yeah.
I just think that using those type of ranges in public forums is very, very dangerous, because that doesn't imply that that's the cost everybody is going to pay. That's the total cost that fossil fuel sector has to pay at the high end and the low end. That's what it is. So I just, this whole thing gets people get emotional about it, but it's just a total cost. Nobody is going to just dividing the math. Doing the math does not mean that those are the costs people are going to pay. It's the same argument as the societal benefits. It's a number that articulates what the society perceives as a benefit. It's that's the flip side of the argument. So, I do not really support these discussions around who's going to pay how much individually. It's just the total cost of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, I think that's true, Srini. I just say, like, I kind of preface our discussion with that being like, these numbers are out. Like, people are sort of saying it costs X dollars and this is the cost on heating oil. And I thought it was helpful for this group to understand, like, they're based in numbers in the report, but it depends on how it'll actually be implemented. So yeah, I think that's helpful context, but that was kind of how I introduced it in terms of these numbers are going to show up in your news and already have, so let's understand why to the best of our ability. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, if I saw your hand up and it's back down,
I changed my mind. Thanks.
Okay, no worries. Ben?
Yeah, and I just wanted to just clarify that the potential study, obviously MD5 was a contractor hired by the Public Service Department, but just wanted to clarify that their potential study is not an implementation plan. So they basically, did the study, but there's multiple different ways that this, this isn't the only way that it could be gone. Basically, they quantified the total potential, the optimized potential, and it is not an implementation plan. So the costs can vary widely depending on how it actually ends up getting implemented in reality. So yeah, but the math that Mia threw out is, in the report for anyone to do. So Mia was just basically taking the numbers that they had put out. And so again, those numbers, the actual implementation cost is going to be different from what is shown here. This study was done just to see if we have the overall market potential to reduce our greenhouse gases to meet Global Warming Solutions Act targets, which the study did achieve and did show that we do in fact have the, we can hit the GWSA targets if we employ the right mix of technologies, et cetera. So not an implementation plan, but one crack at getting, a range of costs, total costs.
I see Mia and I see Jen. I also want to encourage us to think as well about how this might change or not change our approach to the report. Is there anything that we need to think about now that we might need to like retailor or move to? But that Mia and then Jen.
Yeah, kind of on that note, I do have concerns. If you look at sort of and I'm not great at articulating this, but if you look at the, there's like a table in the potential study that has like the top 10 measures that you could do based on like their expected contribution to the Global Warming Solutions Act goals. And weatherization components that we think about are really low on it, in terms of air sealing is like at the bottom of the top 10 and insulation is like not on that list. I'm sure it'll still be an eligible measure, but I think it sort of ties into what Efficiency Vermont was talking about. And I'm worried we think about weatherization as having great benefits, which I definitely believe in for households, especially all the co-benefits that we've talked about. I am worried that we're not going to see the right incentives for doing weatherization. Like if there's not enough emissions to grab from those activities, are we not getting the economic incentives that we need to see weatherization, especially in conjunction with heat pumps that would make these projects, more beneficial for households? So I don't know what recommendations we can make, but I think it's something to watch. Like if the state wants equity and they want the most emissions saved, I don't know that those policies are going to hand in hand based on what the potential study is signaling for feedback. So I think we should think about it, but I don't have a great answer right now.
Jen and then Matt and then Ben and then Emily, and we may have to start winding down after that. Jen, you're on mute.
As a response to Matt and also Srini, as an equity group, we can also bring in some solutions that would lower the costs for income eligible people. So there are some programs that have addressed this by, say, offering a rebate for low income families that end up paying a higher amount for their fuel. So there's solutions that can be addressed to make sure that those who will be most impacted by a higher price on fossil fuels can either get a rebate similar to the housing tax rebate, where we take income into an amount so that it's not a regressive tax. You could also offer people a tax rebate on their income tax. I mean, we can be creative on how we can make sure that this doesn't impact people who are already struggling with energy burdens, but still bring in these transitions, which we know, again, will become societal benefits. And I don't think societal benefits are non-economic either. I think, as we know, as more people switch to different sources of fuel, that can save them money. So the benefits are not just non-economic. And I think there are ways that we can bring more equity into a program that might raise fossil fuel costs, but that will address that will be more of an impact on certain income individuals.
Again, Matt?
Yes, clearly this is going to raise the cost of burning fossil fuels for heat for any residential, commercial, industrial. We don't know the exact number. And the really hard thing that the EAG is going to have to do is issue a report without knowing the exact number, just having a range and understanding that there will be a cost for those Vermonters who continue to use 100 million gallons of propane, 100 million gallons of heating oil. And I think it's probably our job is to say there, we have to write this report knowing that there is going to be a cost. And at some point, if there aren't measures taken to alleviate that cost for low-income Vermonters, it will in fact be regressive. But for us to issue an equity report, not having the full contours of the program, not understanding what the clean heat credit costs will be for those that continue to use fossil fuels, we're really in a tough spot. That's all I wanted to say.
Ben.
Yep, I agree with Matt. Definitely not an easy position to be in. But just wanted to offer some little bit context on the weatherization. It came up when the folks from Efficiency Vermont just presented now, and in the context of the potential study, those numbers that they showed in the presentation today, they're a lot of that is based off of the Efficiency Vermont Technical Reference Manual, which is different than basically that shows savings for weatherization differently than, for example, data we see from OEO and the Weatherization Assistance Program. The Efficiency Vermont TRM does derate some of the savings as a way to, because they don't do on-site verification post install for many of their projects, they have to, basically put some bounds on the savings to make sure they're within range. So those savings are derated. And as an example, the average fuel use reduction for Efficiency Vermont project, somewhere around like 10, less than 20%. Whereas efficiency or OEO is more like 31%. This is like fuel use specifically reduction. So OEO's numbers are you do get more savings out of OEO projects because they are verified on site. And I think if you were to do on-site verification at EVT projects, you'd probably see similar savings. So it doesn't matter how those numbers are reported. So with regards to the potential study, the weatherization values that we see in terms of carbon reduction for the weatherization measures were based off of the Efficiency Vermont TRM. So we are doing some analysis in-house here at the department just to, basically look at further into those weatherization values and see how much more savings could be found from if you, for example, you do on-site verification with like an OEO style of reporting. So that's my guess as to why we see lower carbon reduction savings from air sealing, for example, in the potential study. And also, Ashiri, to your question, just to kind of bring it up again, the fact that the NV5 found that, hitting the 16% low-income target is going to be difficult, and that is not actually, they don't show it hitting that 16% target over the entire study period, I think should be a primary focus for our group, the Equity Advisory Group, because that means that basically there's, if it's impossible or near impossible to hit that 16% target with the existing 60% AMI and lower group, we need to offer an opinion on how we think we might be able to an avenue for obligated parties to hit that value. We need to either get creative or offer, there needs to be some sort of amendment. If those emissions don't exist to be reduced, then there needs to be a change there. So yeah, further discussion on that I think is warranted by this group.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Emily and then Srini.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. That was along the lines of what I was going to touch on too. I think it was really helpful for that, Ben, and then also Srini's question asking that general question to Hillary and Nick regarding cost savings with weatherization, and how Efficiency Vermont calculates that, and like the benefits of weatherization and how important they are for the safety and comfort for low and moderate income Vermonters. So I guess just wanted to support me and Ben's recommendation to, maybe start thinking through weatherization in the clean heat standard and how it's being portrayed right now through savings, and if there's any recommendations the group has. I don't know if we're going to fully get into that right now, but support maybe a larger discussion on that topic, coming up with some solutions.
Thanks, Emily. And Srini, you'll have the last word.
So Ben, thanks for that context. It's quite helpful comparing the OEO baseline for fuel consumption reduction for weatherization versus other calculations as used by Efficiency Vermont. So let me ask a very specific question. If the NV5 assumption for fuel consumption is only a third of what OEO has set, do we have the potential to improve the 12% number in a significant way for the same group of households? I mean, that should be a straightforward math, right?
Yep. So we're working on it here at the department to answer that very question, to just see what that comes up with. Basically, was there savings for that group that was missed in the potential study? I think the methodology that was used in the potential study is sound. Technical reference manuals, as Efficiency Vermont has, are very commonplace throughout the country, and as industry, everyone uses those. But with OEO, it's a very unique program in the sense that they do on-site verification at every site. So you do get those higher savings because it's can be taken at face value. Yep.
All right, thank you.
I think one difference, I'll be real quick, our program, OEO, we prescribe the measures that are cost effective, and we don't let the client pick and choose. We have to do it all, including health and safety, or the project doesn't continue. Nothing against the EVT program. The client, rightfully so, because it's their money, gets to choose what they want to do. And if they don't have the funds to do a complete project, and probably that happens a lot, they don't, but they can still do other measures. So side by side, an average OEO versus an average EVT isn't apples to apples. And I think that's a huge piece of the difference in the savings. And we don't have good fuel, Srini, to do post evaluations, bulk deliveries. A lot of our clients get 3 different fuel sources. They go to the store with a can when their budget's low and they can't get a full fuel truck. So we rarely get good data, hence why we haven't done many fuel studies. So.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
And I hate to rip us out. I feel like today I've just been ripping us out of great conversations, and I hate to say, but it will be characteristic of the next few months. And so I kind of wanted to show you what the next few months are going to look like, and what let's see, let me share really quickly. Yes, so what the next few months look like, and kind of start thinking a little bit more strategically about how we might be working together to get this report out. So this is the work plan, and it's something that we've circulated before, but I'll make sure to recirculate it again. It's a live document, so we kind of add to it as we are shifting things around. So I'll add, the piece about obligated entities. We'll find a way to work it into this. But as you can see, so we have, our next meeting will be in October. We won't find out about the draft rule until October 1st, and we'll be able to respond to it on October 15th, October 29th, and then we have responses due right after that meeting. And then we have very few meetings before we have to formalize the report. So the report, we're hoping to have a formal vote on the report on January 7th, but if we work backwards, we are supposed to have a meeting on December 24th. I hope that none of you join that meeting. We'll be canceling that meeting. But we're proposing having an additional meeting on December 17th to make up for that. And I'll just walk us through it, and then we can pause and talk about some of the details. But we have a meeting on December 10th, which is when we're hoping either December 10th or December 17th for the report to actually be finished. We have a meeting that was originally supposed to be on November 26th, which is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. We're very not feeling great about being able to meet quorum on that day either. So we're suggesting to move that meeting to November 19th. And then we have one on November 12th. And so really between the time that the draft rule comes out and the time that we're hoping to have the report basically finalized, we only have 1, 2, 3 meetings potentially. So that's just a little insight on how squished we're getting. So there's 2 things that we're suggesting. One is being able to have those additional meetings that are during the holiday times that make up for the holiday times. And 2 is to potentially have a working group that can start writing out some of the report pieces. Kind of similar to what we've been doing and what Mia has been piloting with the interns of like turning all of the discussions that we've already had into a written form and then going through it and making edits and finding places that we can ask substantial questions that we can bring back to the EAG as a full so that we have more targeted discussions and make decisions on specific pieces that will go into the report instead of everybody trying to edit the report altogether. So let's deal with that first, the work group. Mia, I'll also hand it over to you if you have any additional input that you'd want to say about that.
Yeah, I mentioned having an intern, and this is someone who works for VHFA. She's a graduate student at UVM and has a day job in sort of a related field at UVM. So she's actually really well poised to help with some of this work. And so far, she's been sort of taking a broad brush look at, I'd say, what is the content of our notes for things that we've already fully covered. So in this case, this was the renter's document that we already looked at. And now she's working on the low income one and kind of filling in the gaps with complete sentences and, prefacing discussions about like, this is what this next section is about, things like that. But she's not really adding any new content besides purely stuff that's like data, like, okay, how many renter households are there? That kind of thing. That leaves, as people have sort of had a discussion over email, that leaves a lot of things that we still need to solve. So I think I'm expecting to have this intern, through the end of the year. I think I might have to work around some other agency, assignments that she has. But for the most part, I'm kind of planning on running out the clock with her time and trying to have her review as many sections as possible to kind of get us as far along as we can. But she's not going to be able to make decisions for us or add sort of missing themes and content that we really want to drive home. So that's kind of her role, and I'm happy to oversee that work with her, but it certainly will have limits in terms of what we can accomplish. And I would just add for context too, I think it's important that, that December 10th deadline, or I guess December 17th, depending upon where we are, is when the report is done. And then, that January 7th deadline is when me and the intern focus on getting it into like a final document PDF so people are really confident. And we've also discussed EAG members individually sending comments that they wanted to represent their own opinion and not something the full EAG has to sign on. So that's going to require cooperation to get to that point and to be comfortable not making any changes on that January 7th meeting and making that sort of, I guess I'd say, ministerial in nature. So we just get that done. So I think those deadlines are going to come up fast, but that's sort of how I see this working and the limits that we're going to be bound by. Happy to answer any questions about that.
Yeah, any questions or any thoughts? Okay, so I think you might see where this is headed. Well, first let's start with the additional meetings. If anyone would like to make a motion for the November 26th meeting to be rescheduled to November 19th. Please speak.
I motion to move the November 26th, 2024 meeting of the Equity Advisory Group to November 19th, 2024.
Great. Do we have any seconds? Pike, I see your hand.
Let me use words.
Pike, do you mind? Yeah.
I second.
Thank you. So all in favor of moving the November 26th, 2024 meeting to November 19th, 2024? I see 8 hands, 9 hands.
Oh, sorry. Yep. You got us, Shira? Yep.
Yes, got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone against? All right, and anyone abstaining? Great. So I'll send out a calendar invite for that. And would anyone like to make a motion to cancel or to reschedule the December 24th, 2024 meeting to December 17th? Would anyone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Show of hands.
Yep. Great. I see 7 hands. All against? 1 hand. And anyone abstaining? Okay. So we'll go ahead and move that one as well, and I'll send out a calendar invite for that as well. Okay, so the next piece of that would be the work group that we discussed that would be in charge of reviewing and kind of putting together the report in a close to final form and coming up with any questions that need to be brought to the EAG as that process goes along. So first, I would ask if anybody would want to make a motion to create that group.
Well, let's just talk about when that would meet, and just conceptually, I think we could firm out a date. I think I have not kept as close of a look on what the public engagement group is. I think the credit issues group could be paused, until at least the draft rule comes out and we have something else to respond to. I think we're in good shape with that. So I don't want to overburden members with too many meetings. So I think that's worth considering. With the public engagement group, do you intend to keep meeting sort of indefinitely, or is time for a pause with that group as well? I don't know if anyone can weigh in. We'll have an update later.
I can jump in. And then I'll pass it to Jen. I'm no longer able to make that meeting time, but I did hear from Jen and others in the group that after we're going to check in with the PUC on that 1-pager for public engagement, because things keep changing related to that topic. Seems like we're closing out our meetings other than that topic. Jen, did you want to?
Yeah, just what you just said. We met today and just felt like that was really the culmination of our group, the 1-pager, which we'll finalize, and then I think we won't need to meet after that.
Okay, great. So let's we can make this motion, but let's tentatively plan to pause both groups. I think we may be sort of shortly reopening the credit issues group to talk about specific rule issues, but that will give people more bandwidth, and we can try to find an appropriate time to do. And I don't know if the credit issues, I don't know if we need agreement on the time before we agree on the concept of a meeting, but I want to make sure that it's going to be hard to find a universal time, but people feel pretty confident attending. I don't know if people are comfortable sort of reusing the credit issues meeting block, because that seemed to work for a good number of people. That would be Wednesdays from 1 to 3, and we could also talk about how long that is.
That works for me. Yep.
Okay. Is there anyone that's like who really wants to participate in this editing group and definitely can't attend that time? Okay, I'm not hearing anything, so let's tentatively plan on that. And if that's not working, we've got a couple weeks to figure that out. But we will plan on reusing that time and pausing the other two working groups. Okay. So since I led us on this journey, I will make a motion to temper or indefinitely pause the credit issues and the public engagement subcommittee groups, and to create a reoccurring report editing working group. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Show of hands. Okay, let's lower those hands. Ashir, you got it. All opposed? Chris, are you opposed? Oh, good. Okay. Okay. So in my opinion, the ayes have it. So we'll follow up with updating the meeting on that. And I think our first discussion, I can work with Ashira on sort of what's sort of more ready. I think our first discussion should probably be about renters. And that's something, if you're not going to be able to make it, but have sort of suggestions for the group, that would be great to send it to Ashira, and we can kind of put everything together and try to move forward as a group. And I think we'll have to check in as a full group about how well that unwieldy process of creating as individuals, editing in a group, and sending it back for whole group agreement is going. And I think we're just going to have to be flexible and patient with that process. But we'll start with renters and sort of see how we proceed along that. So thanks, everybody. Okay. Are there any other questions about editing? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to turn this over to our credit issue subgroup, and people have heard a lot from me. Ben, would you be comfortable giving an update on that?
Sure. So just to clarify, Mia, so I'm saying the right thing. The language in purple is what we decided to add.
Yeah, I can pull that up. Ashir, would you mind sharing that? Yeah, so we took a swing as a group at sort of discussing where to go, and I'm seeing it in red with mine, but
okay. All right, yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Ashir, if you're able to share that, that would be very helpful when you get a sec. Thanks.
So we discussed at the last week's meeting of the subgroup adding a little bit of clarifying language to the memo that we came up on the LMI credit characterization that we spoke about briefly at the last EAG meeting here. I think there was only like 5 minutes left in the meeting though, so it was a little bit rushed. So we wanted to bring this back up. We added this clarifying language, and really we thought that, we should make a decision whether or not we want to move this forward today in advance of the draft rule that is set to come out in the beginning of October. Basically, as we discussed last time, you may remember, and I assume folks had a chance to read this, what this memo essentially opines on is expanding the definition of low and moderate income credit, that that an obligated party can receive a low and moderate income credit from, or how they can acquire it, I guess I should say, to not just be households of low income folks, but to expand it to, for example, if you were to weatherize a nonprofit organization whose mission it is to directly serve low and moderate income individuals. We think this is a good suggestion to make in this context, because especially now that we have some potential study data to reference. I've referenced it a couple times in this meeting today, but basically that it's going to be difficult to reach that 16% target for low-income households. If we're just looking at the emissions that come from low-income households, there may not be enough emissions there to reach that target. So to make it, essentially more equitable or, for obligated parties to hit that goal. If we're going to tell obligated parties they have to hit the 16% target, and that's going to be really difficult to hit. I think expanding the characterization of the LMI credit to include, these nonprofit institutions where they can get an LMI credit from. I think that makes sense, or we think that makes sense. And you can see here, we did clarify some of the language that folks, took issue with last time to be more palatable for the group. So I guess I would, having kind of already explained this once last meeting, I would open it up to the floor here to just get some reactions from the overall equity advisory group. I know, there was some very valid concerns brought up by the group last time that we tried to address with some of the language here. But the credit issues subgroup largely thinks that it makes sense to expand this characterization a little bit too, because again, these nonprofit institutions are helping low and moderate income individuals. It might not be at their actual place of residence, but they are served by these institutions, and so any benefit that they can get, presumably they can pass along those benefits to serve more individuals in the future. So, yeah, I guess I'll open it up for reactions and general discussion on this. Yeah, Jen.
Yeah, I think it looks great. I think you really succinctly added that instead of the organization's primary purpose, the property. And I think that is great to expand the benefits to low income Vermonters in this way. Thanks for doing that.
Mike?
Yeah, I put in the chat and sent earlier to all of you, I believe, a link to my edits to this document. And I think the language could be buttoned up more. I think some of it is a bit, I'm not sure I would say confusing, but doesn't follow logically. So for example, I don't have it all in front of me.
I think Ashira has it up.
Okay.
I went ahead and shared them both side by side.
Okay.
So it looks like you removed the piece where it says, however, despite the challenge posed in producing low-income credits under the clean heat standard, the EAG feels decreasing the lower moderate income requirements under Act 18 is not desirable. And
yeah, so there's been no discussion. I think, the statute is what it is. I don't think we should raise the issue that that they can get away with not meeting those requirements. Yeah, the statute is what it is. There are challenges, and the PUC is going to have to overcome those. I think if we want to, we can say that, the PUC, and I think I put it somewhere up earlier, that the PUC needs to meet their obligations. But a lot of the language I thought was not necessary.
I think that's fine. This kind of reflected the conversation we had, and it was kind of raised as like, well, we don't want the natural conclusion of you can't do enough low income credits to be like, I guess just lower the expectations around that. I don't know that this is the document to do that. That was just kind of the flavor of our discussion, and adding sort of strength to a different credit version could be valuable. I'm fine striking that. I don't know about my other credit issues members who discuss this. It's really just context, but I don't think it's necessary for the point of this document. Now, Ben, we're running short on time, but Ben, Emily, do you have any thoughts on that particular clause, just striking it to make it more acceptable?
I do not at first glance. I'm just kind of reviewing it now, but let's see. Yeah, no, I'm okay with that. Yep. We
And then
strike
it
it.
looks like
Yep.
there's also an addition here at the LMI credits.
Yeah, so that's maybe an addition more. It just combines this. I didn't see the need for the A, B, and C.
Okay.
If there are 3 requirements, let's just put them in the sentence as 3 requirements. And then I tried to also include those things that we are trying to definitely exclude, such as schools and hospitals. And then I had this concern, and maybe it's a unrealistic concern, but there's the voucher program that pays people for temporary hotel stays, and I didn't want to see any of this money going into the pockets of hotel owners. So I tried to add language that suggested that even if we're paying for housing for folks, that's not going to extend as far as we're paying for paying to the nonprofit, and that's not going to get sent over to hotel owners somehow.
Well, first, I don't know how many nonprofit hotel owners there are in this program. There may be some. I think you'd be very challenged to come up with a definition that would include shelters and exclude temporary hotels. So,
well, I'm talking about the voucher program, and I'm not sure all the ins and outs of that, but I didn't want the voucher program to somehow be paid for hotels.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we have time to get into the specifics. I wouldn't view that as a concern, but I guess it could be. I mean, we thought that, in light of the new information that this group received about the shortage of low-income credits, coming up with a slightly more tailored definition to respond to some of the concerns, but not restricting it only essentially to homelessness shelters was the best way to move forward. And I think, in the very limited time we have, I think this was kind of the best second stab of the group. I guess I would propose that we remove the sort of upper context, those paragraphs that Pike has outlined, and then move forward with a vote, recognizing that it's not perfect, but I think this is kind of our shot at doing it. So I'd propose, and I don't know if we need a motion at this point because this was all submitted as a draft. So I don't think we do. Sure, do you
I would still have a vote.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion to remove the draft that came out of the credit issues working group. I make a motion to remove the paragraph sort of highlighted in pink that starts with however, and goes down up until expanding. So this is Sheila on the left screen. Yeah, the part that's struck in Pike's version. So I would propose that we adopt the credit issues version with the stricken text that I just indicated from Pike's version. And I propose that we move forward in adopting that version of the memo. Always apologize for my motions because they're messy. Is there a second for that specific proposal?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Can I have a show of hands who supports that motion? Okay. Okay, and okay, and then let's lower hands. All opposed? Oops, that's not me. Okay, I'm seeing one opposed, and I will assume the rest are abstained. In my opinion, the ayes have it. And Ben, if I could lean on you again to submit this to the docket with just a notation of that it passed and the proper date, that would be wonderful.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. I know this is always hard to get these last minute discussions in, but I think it's good advice for the PUC, so I'm glad we did this. Okay, and I'm very sorry that we always run out of time for the public engagement group, but if we could have a quick update, that would be wonderful.
I am happy to start off. I wasn't there in this meeting, but I, again, heard from the group. So just an update of where we left off in the last EAG meeting was that we have a draft one-pager for public engagement. And then Jen and John, I think Jeff, the rest of the members of the group reviewed that and provided feedback. At this point, I just want to check in with the PUC to make sure, I don't know, to share that draft. I think I have some work to do a next iteration. So I guess next steps is for me to do a next iteration to just make sure it's looking good structurally. I'm not sure what next steps are for engaging with the Public Utilities Commission to just make sure updated public engagement processes are correct. Can I just connect with Dominic and get feedback via email, or can someone clarify what that process looks like?
I think it would be fine for you to get feedback, and then we can put time in the next agenda for the group to review it. So maybe having it available in the packet for the next time, and if there's something to approve, does that sound like that will align with what you were thinking?
Yeah, am I allowed to just check in with Dominic or the PUC via email to make sure there's like correct information on their side?
Yeah, and I'm getting emails from Dominic. I think something's wrong with his audio, but he says
Okay.
yes.
Sorry about that, Dominic. I haven't checked my email. Yeah, so Emily, I think that would be fine. There's no reason we can't communicate with the PUC, and then we'll put in space in the agenda next time. And if you could have it ready for the packet next time, that would be great, and we can vote on that or advise on it. Sounds great. Awesome. Anything else on the public engagement front? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Ashira for very quick next steps.
Yes. Okay. So next steps, myself and Mia will circulate the presentation from Efficiency Vermont to the EAG. I and Dominic will upload the resource library to the PUC website with the disclaimer and restrictions to only the EAG. The EAG plans to discuss at a later date the possibility of hitting the 16% target and what that means for low income households and if that's possible or not. I will recirculate the work plan. I will also change the calendar invites for the Thanksgiving and Christmas meetings based on what we voted on. We will reuse the credit issues time Wednesday from 1 to 3 to repurpose it for report editing. Ben will send the updated LMI memo to the PUC, and Emily will send around the public engagement one-pager. Is there anything that I missed?
Ashira, can you just clarify? You said the first thing you'll share the Efficiency Vermont one-pager. Did you mean the presentation? Okay.
Yes, sorry. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Yes, I know that was a wild finish, but we did it. Thanks everybody for your commitment. Yep, so we'll send out invites for the updated meeting, and otherwise I think we're in great shape. So I am going to call this meeting to a close. Looking forward to seeing many of you next week. Okay, bye everyone.
Thank you all.
Yep, thanks.